All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode. Very exciting episode. I don't think we are going to say a lot in this episode just because we have a guest who is here with us today. So Ruth is a therapist, and yeah, so see, literally, this might be a free session for everyone who's ever considered having a therapist. So yeah, Ruth, do you just want to introduce yourself? And we this is like a check-in, so we just ask you how your week has been before we get into the whole chit chat. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for having me on. I'm Ruth Akinwale. I'm a life coach. I started off as a counsellor and trained and qualified in Christian counselling and moved on to train and qualify in coaching psychology. I thoroughly enjoy what I do. I think what gives me the biggest smile is when I work alongside clients and they have that aha moment that they always knew it all
Mm.
along. I just absolutely enjoy walking alongside all my clients to see that they come to the realization that they knew it all along.
Yeah, that's great. And
Yeah,
how's your week been?
it's been very busy. What have I been up to this week? I've had children have lots of sports, hockey.
Oh.
We just had one child start on hockey, which has been profound because it's a new skill. And watching her learn that and go through the learning curve of this is a new skill, mom. How do I do this? I'm so bad at it. I'm so good at it, and varying emotions. That's been exciting. And we've had a couple of hiccups because we've just moved to a new kind of country at the moment, so we're trying to settle in. But it's been a good and a busy week.
Oh, that's good.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
So
nice.
I
Oh, go on,
go
B.
on.
I was just gonna say, how you finding your new location?
It's very different. I think moves in itself, it's interesting because this is another kind of, I think it comes up a lot in therapy. Lots of people don't appreciate how much moving house or changes affect them and trigger a
Mm,
lot of their own internal processing. We find that we either move house and things happen and we either gloss over it or we perhaps exaggerate them. What we're not really doing
mm,
is pausing to reflect, how has this move affected me? And so the
Mm.
new location's good, but it's brought up lots of things for every member of my family, which is interesting to work through.
See,
I hope you enjoy it.
yeah, I was gonna ask when you were saying kids and now you said family. I'm thinking, do you sometimes have to put on your hat? Do you ever? I don't want to say. Do you ever treat your family as clients and have
Uh,
to sit them through like this is how you walk this through, or this
yeah.
is how you
Well,
think about?
I'm my first client. I certainly walk myself through lots of things, and I go
Mm,
Oh,
through that
okay.
interesting.
with my own coach as well. I have my own therapist, but I do tend to put that on, possibly more so with my husband, who is the most stubborn client. He's like, "I'm not your client. Stop." Yeah.
Yeah.
So I probably have that. But yeah,
Mm. Oh,
Hmm.
nice. Yeah, nice
Okay.
to have you, Van. How's your week been?
How's my week been? My week's been okay. As you guys know, sound like a broken record now. I'm busy at work, very busy. So we're going through a lot of changes, good changes. But that means that I am very busy. So I've just
Mm.
tried to. I go to the gym during the day now, so as opposed to doing my lunchtime because I get an hour for lunch. I spoke to my boss and I'd asked for an extension. So can I get like an extended lunch period where I just go to the gym, instead during the day, just to go for a walk, um, and just try to de-stress as much as I can. Trying to do a lot of stuff, so business planning, and just general stuff because I always get like these bursts of inspiration where I'm like, oh, I was working on this a few months ago and I stopped. Let me carry on.
Mm.
And I just get my laptop out and I'm just like, oh, okay, this is exciting, and just do that. So I'm trying to maximize my evenings more, which is why I want to go to the gym in the lunchtime. So like in my evenings I can not just watch TV because I can be a couch potato and just sit there all day and just watch TV. So I want to be more productive in my evenings, which means I'm now very, 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 very busy. But all in all, I'm grateful, as I always am. Thank God that I have a job. Thank God I have a roof over my head.
Yeah.
But that's it. My week's been all right. All in all. And yeah, how about you, being? How have you been?
I'm sleeping less at my desk. Well,
Good.
that's yeah. I mean that's good. No, but I'm still hell bent on this. Like, I came into September for the last quarter of the year saying I will do more than I've ever done in terms of like actually trying to put in 100%, or starting things and seeing them through.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm hoping November I get to tick off one or two things. But I'm trying to sleep at my desk less, which I actually don't mind, if I'm being honest.
You don't
I feel
mind it,
like,
but is it good though? Let's be asking the right questions.
Mhm.
Is it sustainable?
I mean,
Is it
that's
sustainable?
sustainable, no, but it only has to last to December. I've decided that from next year, Sunday
Mm,
would be my complete off day. Like, I would not
nice.
put on my laptop, but then it means I have to get everything done
Yeah, so you
before
need to be more
Sunday.
organized.
But then it means I can't procrastinate on things and see
Good.
Sunday as my catch up day.
See, we're
Well, so which
learning.
means I will sleep at my desk on Monday to Friday and get this done. That's the way I
That's
see it.
not. Anyway,
But
let's.
the more I
Gosh,
tick off, the less I would have to be at my desk. And then it's just for
glory.
God to bless the work of my hands
Yeah, I think to be
and
honest,
and make me as rich as my rich Asian man that I
I'm a
found
I'm a,
earlier in
I'm a
the
big
year. So
supporter of what's it called, continuous improvement, as you know. So it's like just try to do better every day. There's no point trying
yeah.
to plunge into
Mhm.
perfection. Just actually, let me not even get too much into it. That's why we have Ruth. So Ruth needs to be like, Brandon, no. But yeah, so Ruth, obviously we've done our welcomes, so thank you once again. Thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited
Yeah.
about this episode. I'm very excited about having you on here. And I'm sure our followers are as well. They just don't know it yet. So we actually we have some questions.
Mhm.
And I wanted you to, try to, I guess, give your thoughts or try to answer them the best way you can.
Mhm.
And then from there, we can kind of steer the conversation into further questions and try to, get some understanding and some stuff that's been like niggling in my mind as well.
Mm.
So the first one that we had is said, oh, okay, let's start with this one. It was, I thought I sent it
Yeah, you
to
sent it.
oh yes, so we have this. So just to give you an idea of how old this person is about 30
Okay.
years old, and said, can you please ask her what her top management tips are on managing generalized anxiety disorder? So this person works in the medical field, and obviously has a very, very busy schedule, and I guess as a person maybe who has some sort of self-doubt, anxiety, like how would you recommend that this person help manage it? This person's also Christian, so if you want to talk along those lines as well.
Yeah. Do you have any more background about this person apart from the fact that it's 30? Is it 30-year-old female or male?
Yeah, she's a 30-year-old female,
Right. Okay.
only girl. Yeah, obviously, yeah, like medical practitioner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a very, very large, broad question, and so I will deal
Hmm.
with it first of all broadly, and perhaps then we
Mm.
can probe into other scenarios that would lend
Hmm.
itself to more specific application. Um, the first thing I would say to anybody struggling or identifying that they are struggling with anxiety is immediately be kind to yourself. That's the first thing I would say. Be kind to yourself. Okay. And understand that what you're feeling is that it's your feelings and they are your perception of certain realities that are going on around you. Okay. And in being kind to yourself is understanding that actually it's okay in that moment to be feeling how you're feeling. And I think that then it allows you to be able to take that step further to almost disassociate your feelings by being aware of what you're thinking. So if I find that I'm in a workplace that's really stressful, my boss perhaps wants so much more of me, especially within the NHS, that I can't give. I'm finding that I'm really pressured and I'm sweating. I'm feeling very nervous. I'm feeling very anxious. In that moment, I'm going to isolate that situation. My boss is stressing me out, okay? I'm sweating. What am I thinking? I'm thinking maybe I failed my boss. Okay, why am I thinking that I failed my boss? So I'm already making myself aware of what I'm thinking. That situation has triggered a thought of I failed my boss, which could, for me as my own personal experience, it would have triggered I'm a failure. And then it would have triggered other things. Do you see how I'm making myself aware of my thinking? Now, this is not a solution, but it is a path to the solution. Okay. That increased self awareness will allow you to be able to distance yourself from that feeling by making it less personal. So I am not my feeling, but I'm feeling the feeling. Do you see?
Mhm.
That way I can catch a hold of that anxiety in the moment. Now, this awareness that I'm describing to you, number one, it takes practice. Okay. And not just practice, it doesn't necessarily happen in that moment. It takes reflection. So the person gets home, they're flustered. At work, I was so overwhelmed. I was panicking. I had to put the drugs in this cabinet and that. I felt very annoyed. Write down those feelings. Write down the 5 core feelings that you were feeling: sweaty, stressed, hot and bothered. And then write down what you were thinking when those feelings started, as I've just explained. Okay. I felt like I was a failure. I felt like I let my boss down. Okay. This is now you reflecting on that situation, and you're being kind to yourself. And look, I know that's how I felt, and now I'm assessing it. And then this is how I would recommend that person starts to take their cognitive diary, awareness of what they're thinking. And this will give them the ability then to be able to not just reflect on their thoughts, but actually potentially start to challenge their thoughts, reframe their thoughts, and build a different neural pathway, different type of thinking framework to deal with situations that arise.
Hmm.
So in so what so I'm terrible at keeping diaries.
Mm-hmm,
Um are there are there any other tools? Because I hear a lot of people saying write things
mm-hmm,
down. But what if you're so bad at writing things down?
mm,
Like I have like 10 notebooks. Even looking at my desk now, there's 4 notebooks. One only has a Bitcoin wallet code on it, and
mm,
I've not used it for anything else.
mm.
Actually, there's actually 5 here. So are there other alternative? Because I've done
Yeah.
Notion, then I'll switch from Notion to just using, what do you call it? The notes on that comes with your phone. Are
Mm,
there any alternatives to like diaries and
mm-hmm,
and taking notes?
mm-hmm. Absolutely. There are recordings are one thing. You can keep memos on the way
Oh,
back from
okay.
work, start to make memos, video recordings, audio recordings, all work. Another thing that I particularly like and I do with my own clients is I have some wristbands. It takes preparation. Okay. So with those wristbands, with my clients, we'll work through 5 beads that represent 5 different feelings and thoughts. Okay. And you can, with that wristband, isolate one bead in the moment that you're feeling that feeling. And then when you get home, either record it, make a note of it by
Oh,
video, or take a picture, because you have already from my session, we've isolated what that bead means. Okay. And that gives you
oh.
a record. You're building a record, hopefully, to be able to identify all these things that you're thinking and feeling. But the biggest thing with experiencing anxiety is be kind to yourself. A lot of times, anxiety gets worse because we feel the pressure to either get isolated or tell yourself you're not okay to be feeling that, you're not okay to be thinking that. And we are our biggest own critics. And practicing that actual, you know what, Brandon, Vanessa, Ruth, you're okay. You're actually okay. It does so much to propel this whole process. But yes, there are lots of different ways to keep recordings: audio memos, video memos, photographic memos, beadworking with my bracelets that I suggest to my clients.
Interesting. Okay.
Mm.
All right. Should I ask one?
Yeah, go
Yeah.
for it.
So this is interesting and funny, but it says so there's a song from Drake,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's a line in the song that says, "My therapist's voice is making choices for me." So do you ever get worried that people would listen to your words or advice instead of, like you said earlier, them having that aha moment or
Mm,
coming to realization for themselves?
yeah,
You know, do you ever worry that they take your words as a final say
yeah.
instead of working through the practice and
Mhm,
coming to a
mhm.
decision by themselves?
Yeah, I absolutely love this question, Brandon. As you can see, I just laughed so hard because in our training, one of the biggest things that is drilled into you is that you must allow your client to express themselves and be as impartial as possible. But we all know human beings have opinions about everything, okay? So we're
Mm.
trained to actively listen. There are some therapists, interestingly, one of them who I really respect, her clients love her because she gives a lot of her opinions. And I find that very interesting. I think it depends, number one, on the type of therapist you're looking for. I myself, when I work with my clients, I love them to have their own opinions. I love them to develop because I do not believe that a human being is broken in any way. I think that sometimes it's just the connection that's broken. It's just us not making sense of what's going on. I feel like everybody has their own answers within them. And my job is to just draw out that answer. Deep calls onto the deep. I'm there to help you draw out the greatness that's already inside of you. You actually discover your own voice, not to listen to me give you the narrative, because that compounds already to probably some issues that my clients already struggle with. So I think that would be down to number one, therapeutic style. But also, it's been quite harmful because I've met some clients who have come to me, and unfortunately for them, they've spent a lot of their sessions sheepishly wanting to hear what I think, or a lot of their sessions
Mhm.
wanting to be diagnosed because of this cloud and this, I think, unhelpful narrative that your therapist is there to tell you what to do, either because of rogue therapists that haven't been trained properly, or people who draw their therapist into this, salvation or salvific narrative that you're here to rescue me. No, a true, I think, an effective therapist sits there, not necessarily impartial. I think it's impossible to be impartial, but with an ability to help you discover the you that you need to pull out so that you can live that life that's best made for you. That would be my response to that.
So I can I segue into another question that came up
100%,
because, and
please.
you just touched on what is it, therapeutic style. So there are questions or conversations about people who had gone to like a session or two with a therapist
Hmm.
and it's put them off
Yeah,
because maybe they just couldn't connect or the therapist doesn't seem to understand.
yeah,
Um, what should, I guess the question was more in the line of like, what should people look out for when picking a therapist? So
yeah,
unfortunately, now this is me adding to the question. I'll
yeah,
play the
yeah, yeah,
race card a bit. So if you go to a therapist that's a white male and
yeah.
you're a black female who probably grew up in Belgium, I can use
Hmm.
my sister as an example. I don't remember who our therapist is, but she was born in Belgium, grew up in the UK.
Hmm.
How then do you start? What should one look out for?
Hmm.
That was a question when picking a therapist, so that they don't try to go again and then they are like, oh,
Yeah,
second time now, I'm definitely not coming back to this.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the first thing I'll say is, in honor of all my colleagues out there, is sometimes some sessions can be very clunky. I've had some sessions with clients in the first two, and it felt like we did not build rapport, but the client has persisted, and actually, it's been really immense. So I would say to somebody, if after two sessions you're not feeling a connection, write down or record what the stumbling block is for that lack of connection. So in my example, this particular person was triggered that I was a lawyer. Okay. And so she was a lawyer before
Oh,
and she had given up, but she had issues from her own trauma of being a lawyer. Okay. And so she was
mm,
triggered that I was a lawyer, that similarity in her had been triggering when I was actually talking to her, Brandon. So she'd see me and she'd see her past as a lawyer. She had
oh,
to overcome that herself. That did not
Mm.
mean that I was not a good therapist for her. That meant that she had things that she was working through.
Needed
And
to
actually,
work through.
exactly.
Mm.
So I think it's
Mm.
ask yourself what is, but it could well be that actually that person is in a different, like you said, they have no connection with what you're saying and doing. You're a black female with blocks like me. And then I'm talking to a
Mm.
white male who has no experience or empathy in terms of my own personal um experiences that I may have had with institutional racism. Okay.
Mm.
Maybe I want someone who I can build rapport quickly with that. But I think it's important as a person, when you first have a session with your therapist, um, let it be a moment where you ask questions about them, about their style, about their approach, and be honest with yourself in terms of what you're looking for from your
Oh.
sessions. Not necessarily, oh, what do I want from the person? What do I want from the session? And can this person enable me to reach that final objective? Okay. Maybe you don't need someone who would be like you. Maybe you need someone who would
Mm.
confront the things that are stumbling blocks for you, that would actually help challenge you and bring out that best in you. And many of us don't want to be challenged. And therapy can
Mm.
be very challenging. Good therapy.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah.
So I have actually two questions of my own, but before that, I just wanted to say that, do you like, well, this might actually be my third question, so I'll ask it
Mhm.
first. Do you think that people have been through so much in their life,
Mhm.
and this this therapy session is almost like a paid ally? Like, they know what they feel and
Yep.
they need someone to validate that, just to be
Yep.
like, aha, I'm not crazy. I did go through
Mm.
that. Like, as opposed to wanting to work through it, they just need someone to
Mm.
co-sign their opinions. Do you ever feel like that?
Um, absolutely. But then I guess I will throw a spanner in there.
Hmm.
What's wrong with that? Maybe they need it just
Ah.
to be able to step over, because I think that this is why I recall even myself needing to speak to my supervisor, just to have someone to understand the pain that I was going through in that moment. And once I had his rapport, once I had his understanding, I was able to look over that and just move on. But
Mm.
many of us don't have people to stop for the one. Nobody stops for the one. We're all grouped up as a group of either black people, working people, whatever. But does anybody really stop for the one? And this is the danger in the
Hmm.
society that we have. Who stops for the one? Can
Well,
you think
Jesus.
of exactly, exactly?
I
Yeah, but
Yeah.
if you're not Christian, you can't just say Jesus, can you?
get what you.
But
Yeah, I
even
just thought it was a nice way to slip
no,
that in there. Like,
absolutely no. And
he
Jesus
leaves
does
the
stop for
99
the
for the
one.
one.
He
Ooh.
does absolutely with a pharaoh. He does, and he trains the disciples to do just that. And I think that as
Yeah.
Mm.
good listeners, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a paid for therapist, but creating a space where you also learn to stop for yourself, for others,
Hmm.
and to receive that one that is stopping for you, that Jesus that's stopping for you. But honestly, I do think that sometimes some people want to know that they're not crazy, or actually be told by themselves that, "Oh, maybe I was a bit crazy." And perhaps you do need that.
Just some sort of validation. Mm.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, not yeah. I'll say validation, because validation doesn't necessarily always have to be a bad thing. Like, sometimes it actually can be good. Okay, so I have two questions. So
Hmm.
I think I'll answer them. I'll ask them one at a time, so we can you can answer them, and then I ask the second one.
Yeah.
So the first one is, so in terms of who you've worked with over the
Yeah.
years, I've always been quite curious about this question. Have you found any common denominators working with children of African descent, particularly those who are firstborns?
That's an
It's very
interesting
specific.
question. It's very specific. Gosh, it had me thinking.
No,
um,
I asked that because I just want to know, like, is there any issue that you found common to all of them, that, oh, actually they actually all
All
firstborns,
crazy. Yeah.
all
well,
African descent, and all happen to have this same problem, just for the wider audience. So if you do have this issue, maybe, it's just
I think
common to all of us.
I probably want to split it up a little bit into I don't know, maybe things that I recall,
Hmm.
because we are encouraged to record our own personal diaries, but I don't keep information about my clients. I do have my
Okay.
diary that I keep in terms of what I process
Okay.
myself. I've had moments where I've been triggered actually in sessions, and many of my colleagues have been. Where
Ooh.
after the sessions, I realized that there's been so much emotion. Interestingly, this has happened more so with my male clients, where I feel a lot of emotion coming out from inside of me, and we have to work through that. I think, you know, you kind of have to always work through that. But I have observed a certain sense of responsibility with many people that would either be firstborns or but the funny thing is I'd always know someone from an African descent because every time we meet, they look at me and they always want to know if they got it right. It's like, did I get that right? What is the
Ooh,
I ask a
Ah,
question, they go, is this a test? A, B, or C? And it's just so intriguing because you think, and
interesting.
I understand because I remember, my dad, if I ever came first or got an A minus, he'd go, oh, who got the A plus? So there's that kind of,
nice.
Did you listen to our last session, Ruth? Because we told them that a lot. Like,
right, okay.
okay, but yeah, okay.
Hmm.
Oh wow.
So there's always that need
So
to get it right, and I see it in
yeah,
them, and they've been perhaps the ones that struggle a lot with maybe accepting more grays and actually understanding that they have the autonomy to create not just their own path, but how they walk and how they retrieve information,
mm,
etc. Yeah.
yeah, that's
You know, it's actually interesting you say because I've never actually thought about um your therapist being triggered by something that you're saying because
yeah,
we
that's
we
interesting.
sometimes always like dissociate,
Mm,
not that we don't see you as a human being, but it's almost as though you're giving answers and all this wisdom. We forget that you also have your background and things that you've gone through and
mm,
even trauma and
yeah,
things that may be under the surface that something that you say may just trigger your
yeah.
therapist. Okay.
And it's amazing. One of my colleagues
Wow.
that I really, really look up to a lot, I'll throw her name out there because Google her. Dr. Sarah Louise, a really good friend of mine, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the things I love, love, love about what we do is we get to be applying what we're doing to ourselves, and this is what I think makes the most powerful type of life coaches or doctors or therapists, is that do you take your own
Mm,
medicine, and you will, if
Mm.
you're human, be touched on so many. And the reason we do this is because of the love that we have for people. So if you're going to be untouched, then I don't even want to see you. I don't want to have anything to do with you. And so, um, absolutely, you're triggered on many levels. Some, deeper than others. But like I said, I've experienced this more so with male clients because the emotions that they feel are so not that the women don't feel emotions, but it's just so powerful and so raw and real, and it's triggering not in a negative way. It's so helpful and helps me in my own personal journey as well.
oh,
Hmm.
that's very interesting. I wonder if the male one feels that way just because it's all bottled up.
You wonder if what? Sorry.
I wonder if the male emotions are so like, you know, maybe heavy because it's all bottled up
Yes,
before then.
absolutely, 100%. They're not giving the space. Most men, I think, aren't given the space just to express themselves, and it's a matter of fact. I had my son the other day say to my husband, "Dad, when last did I see you cry?" Because I think it was common, and just men just getting
Mm,
to be emotional, and knowing that that's not a failing, it's not immature, it's part of the processing of life. Yeah.
yeah, that I think something I've noticed about myself, and it's not maybe not just even the emotion side. It's also knowing when to reach out when I'm in the middle of things that are happening. For some reason, I totally zone out and I forget that there are people I can reach out to. And then after
Mm,
the ordeal is over, I'm like, why didn't I call this person? Why didn't I text my friend? Why
mm,
didn't I, you just tend to like go into your into your world or into your shell and totally forget that that there are people out there that you literally are there for you
mm,
when you need it. So yeah,
mm.
that's that's interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I think society sometimes tells men to just carry it all and do it all by themselves, especially perhaps maybe um, other ethnicities, Asian. I've seen this a lot with Asians, not just Africans, but they have this thing
Mm,
where it's a narrative, it's a societal narrative that you're a man, you can deal with this. You don't need to tell anybody about this. You can deal with it by yourself. Yeah.
no, interesting. Van, any more questions?
I do.
Or
There's
okay,
another
go.
question. It's the last one. So, have you? Hmm, I think well, I could say it's a two-parter. So one is, have you identified any um stigmas around therapy with people of maybe African and
Mhm,
Caribbean descent? And why do you think that is? Reason I ask is that God, some parents,
mhm,
I'm not being very specific by the way, but I've had conversations with a lot of my friends because many of us have found ourselves in therapy. Praise
mhm.
Jesus for that. But there's always been this common thing of, I'm not telling my mom because she's going to think I'm
Yeah.
crazy,
Mhm.
or something's wrong with me,
Yeah,
or why am I not praying as a Christian? Why am I not
yeah,
praying? Or do you want to? My favorite one was, it's going to go down in your, like, in the record, in the system, that
yeah,
you have sought, help for your mind.
yeah.
And so, w- have you found that with a lot of people, or have they mentioned it to you, a lot of people of African and Caribbean descent? One is, and two is, where do you think that comes from,
Mhm.
in terms of like their parents
Yeah,
and people around them?
yeah.
Mm,
I found this not just with people of African descent. I found this with people of British descent, Asian descent, especially Asian. There's been
Mm.
this sense of shame. I think that to kind of make it very applicable to, first of all, Christian thinking and therapy, it's been something that's been hugely contentious within churches and within Christian people because we are praying people, right? And so we're told that if you pray, you declare you're fine, just like healing, But one thing we
mm,
don't realize is process, and mind renewal is a process. And you're perfect in your spirit when you're born again, right? Okay. But your soul's still here and has experienced things in this life that need not just healing, because again, this is what's unhelpful. People think that you must be damaged goods to go in to see a psychologist or a therapist. You're just sick, you're impaired. And those are all cultural stigmas that we have attached to that, as opposed to, I realized that my thinking isn't allowing me to be the person that I want to be, either at work, in my home setting. My thinking is in some way, shape, or form limiting me from manifesting who I want to be. And so I'm going to allow myself to undergo some form of reformation almost. And that's the mind renewal program. And I think it's really helpful for us to remind ourselves of this. But I've noticed the stigma specifically with churches who think, oh, you're just, in terms of that put people off
mm.
going to see therapy because they tell them that they don't need it, they're healed. It's just long. And but actually many of them don't understand, first of all, Christian therapists that are out there, what are we doing, how are we approaching this topic delicately, and I think in a godly way, in a good way. Okay. But in terms of, is it something specific to African descent? I personally would take a different opinion. I just think I see it all the time. Many people feel shame, either because the awareness that they're struggling or because of things that society has told them that actually mental health is a stigma. And if your mind is struggling, you must be less than, and that's not the case.
Mm. I want to see your reaction to this statement
Mhm,
because when Van was asking that question, I, from my experience, I think I don't know other African parents, but I can only use mine as example. I think they see it as they've done a bad job as a parent if you have to go to therapy. I remember
mhm,
when my aunt first found out I was in therapy, she was like, "Are you okay? Are
mhm,
you okay?"
mhm.
And then we had a family meeting and I mentioned, and I could see my mom, it's almost like this, oh, I've been such a bad parent, or
Mhm.
I've really screwed up as a parent that
Yeah,
you think you need to go to therapy.
yeah, yeah,
What's your thoughts on that?
yeah.
Van, are you okay?
Vanessa, are you going through your own personal processing right now?
No, it's because, like, I think for sorry, and before we go, I don't know, like, before we go into you answering, I just want to say that I am someone who, by God's grace, through the help of people on this call, let me just, like, limited, like just say it like that. I have been through therapy and it was beautiful.
Mhm.
And I think after a few sessions, I confided in my younger brother about it. And you know what he said to me? He said, "There it is. Something's changed with you, you know?"
Mm.
But I couldn't put my hand on it. He said, "You know, you say no more." He said, "You
This.
say no more. You're calmer. You're very
Mm.
chilled. Like it's almost as though at some point I thought there was something wrong with you because you just became very zen. It's like your no was no, and you weren't going to argue about it, and you're just like, you know what, no." And at some point I was like, because you don't say no often, it was very strange. So eventually I was able to come out and say, but obviously my mom didn't have. She had a very like she had a look on her face, like a horrific look, like, have I failed?
Yeah.
Am I the reason? Have I pushed you
Yeah.
into therapy? And I'm like, you know what? What you said, Ruth, was actually what got me into therapy, which was the way I am at this moment
Mm.
is heavily interfering with how I do life.
Mm.
Nothing
Mm.
in life is working. Everything is, I feel overwhelmed
Mhm.
by everything.
Mhm.
Work is too much, church is too much,
Mhm.
home life is too much, friendships are too much. I am drowning. And it's all
Mhm.
because I've gotten to a point in my life where the way I have chosen to navigate a lot of things
Mhm.
isn't sustainable.
Mm.
Being a people pleaser isn't sustainable. Being a
Mm.
yes person is no longer sustainable.
Mm.
And I have now gotten everyone around me used to a Vanessa that's not sustainable. And
Mhm.
so, how do I navigate this without now coming across as this nasty person or this inconsiderate person?
Mhm.
You know, how
Yes.
do I still maintain being a good friend,
Yeah.
but still being able to say, I cannot do 4 holidays this year. I don't have money for it.
Mhm.
As opposed to, oh, let me not, I don't want to seem like, oh, I don't,
Mm.
I'm a miser. I don't want to seem like I'm always saying no to things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I just want parents to understand that it's not, I mean, yes, a lot of the stuff that you've done to us pushed us to therapy. Like, we're not going to absolve you of the blame, but it's also because we want to we want to be good spouses. We've seen a lot of things from your parenting
Mm.
and how you've navigated, dealing with our siblings individually and how you navigate your friendships and even your relationship with your siblings. And that's trickled down to us. And now we don't want to pass that on to our children. And so we want to make sure that we become whole and healed and actually deal with the stuff that you don't want to talk about, obviously. And so we can be better parents. So back to you, Ruth.
Yeah. So and that's really good. And I think that as a parent myself, if if I were to be feeling that way, it would be one of many things. Number one, that I didn't understand either fully what was going on for that child, and I didn't
Mm.
understand what therapy was in the first place, or what therapy is. To see that as my failure, and lastly, I would have a false sense of responsibility. Um,
Mm,
One of the big things that I've mentioned earlier is, again, it's about my thinking. I go to therapy to deal with me and my thinking. So first things there is they need to understand what therapy really is. It's not necessarily dealing with their thinking. Actually, it's not dealing with their thinking at all. And there's this
Mm.
false responsibility, I think, to think that because you have a child, it's your responsibility to fix them and control them and mold them into this thing, this putty that you want that's perfect. Okay. It isn't any parent's responsibility. It's a joy to get to partner with a child to go through life. And I think this is the big thing about, you mentioned people pleasing, not to segue, but especially in our culture, I've witnessed anyway many people that are naturally people pleasing and by I say our culture, I'm of Nigerian descent, and I've noticed this a lot. Just want to make everybody happy, and I've kind of questioned this therapeutically, not just studying people, but reflecting on people upbringing, and I think there's a real sense of false responsibility that's placed on parents within the African culture to produce a child that looks a certain way, which will then reflect on your efficiency as an individual.
Mm.
And that in itself is a huge fallacy. And we get this. You can be invited into that space, but it's not anybody's individual responsibility to shape anybody into anything.
So my first reaction to that
Yeah.
is, and maybe this is just my upbringing and something I've
Yeah.
not thought about, and it's just triggered something now. My first reaction, because I'm thinking, for example, my dad and my sisters, and I'm
Mhm.
saying their dynamic. So I'm thinking, if I have kids and the kids aren't going, so it's not like they are necessarily bad. They are not
Mhm.
bad, actually. They are good kids. So if
Mhm.
I'm putting myself as if my sisters are my kids, they're actually good kids. But what if there are certain values that I uphold that they don't have, or I would like them to have? Because you just said it's not the parents' job to mold anyone,
To
right?
put them as they want them to be. It's not the parents' job to. So you have putty. I love how Jeremiah puts it that we are clay and God's the potter. He's the one that you think of putty like blue tack, or we can go into pottery terms that builds and molds into the way that they should be. But a parent's job, my task as a parent, is to nurture that child, to understand what perhaps the revelation that I might have into that shape of pottery that they are, and help guide them and push them into this world, um, to enable them to be the best them. Now, in terms of upholding values that I want them to uphold, if I'm integral, I'm congruent with myself, I'm authentic, I will live by my values. And I think necessarily this will be imparted, not just to my children, to my community. And if my child
Mm.
somehow does not stick to that same value, I would believe that they are going through a process. Interestingly, a lot of my friends that aren't of African descent, they're very open to their children getting help from children therapists. So we do that. My son's seen one, for example, but interestingly,
Huh?
I find that African people aren't as open because, do you go out to seek help? My son's 7, and I've had him seen from 5 because there were traits of his behavior that I wasn't happy to deal with. And I didn't feel like, as a mom and a therapist myself, I felt we had too much proximity. And so I needed to take him outside of me
Mm.
to deal with that. But that wasn't on my failing. That was because I actually really wanted the best for him.
Sorry,
That
sorry.
is so fascinating. Because I'm sorry, my Nigerian brain
Yeah.
is struggling, struggling. Even though everything we've said, my Nigerian brain is struggling to
Yeah.
understand. Not to, I understand it, but to just kind of be like, yeah, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
Like my Nigerian brain is right now like trying to process, because I think this is the first time I've heard outright someone say, I don't actually think I know of anybody that their kids are in therapy at such a
Mm.
young age,
Mhm. Yeah.
although my sister who is 17, I would love for her to see someone, because
Mhm.
she's amazing,
Yeah.
but I think she just needs like,
Mhm.
but now
And
hearing that someone younger is, I'm just like, is that, should that be happening? Is that right?
And I guess
do you know?
sorry, Vanessa,
Go
what
on,
did
go
you
on,
want to
Ruth.
say?
I just wanted to say that it's weird because we're of Nigerian descent, but I'm on the other side of B. I like that. I like that because
Mm.
I feel like the way I've seen people navigate parenting, I feel like they have not necessarily too much responsibility, but they
Mhm.
have this thing where I can fix my child. And I'm like,
Mhm.
sometimes you have to accept that you don't have the range
Mhm.
because the
Mm.
stuff that your child is dealing with, and as a parent, you just want to knock it out of them. Like, no, you can't behave like that. Or you want to pray it out of them, but you've never taken a step back to understand why your child is behaving like that. Because sometimes I've noticed, and I mentioned this in the last episode, guys, if you do not follow someone called Praise Forward, please go and look for this man. Because even as a grown up, guys, I'm 31, and as a grown up, he's even helped me understand some of my behaviors. Because sometimes with parenting, I'm not a parent, by the way, so I'm just speaking from my understanding of what I've seen. It's like you don't like something within your child, Sometimes it's just literally this is bad and bad is bad. That's like literally black and white. But sometimes it's outside of your norm. So you cannot, as a woman, understand why your son is so talkative because you think guys should be reserved. And so you're like, are you a girl? Stop it. Like, stop talking so much. You know, or a lady, like, for a very long time, my mom used to say to me, I have two sons, not three. Like, because I was very, like, you know, like, hard in her opinion. Now it's what she praises me for. Because she's like, oh, you're so confident. Oh, you're so, like, you know, like, I found myself in a very male dominated industry. And I'm like, I'm so glad they didn't beat it out of me or talk me out of it. But I'm always quite cautious, I think, in my thing where it's like, when I become a parent by God's grace, where do I draw the line between my child is doing something wrong or my child is doing something either I don't like or I am not familiar with? And how do I navigate that? Do you see my question? So, because this guy said a lot of you guys beat your kids or chastise your children because you're not used to, you were timid as a child. So you see a confident child as someone who's rude. But they're not rude, they're not disrespectful, they listen, they don't talk over you, but they have an opinion and they're not timid. They're confident enough to express how they feel. But you can't reconcile that because when you were younger, you talking in the presence of adults meant you had no home training, it meant you were rude, you know, and when if you know, when you were younger, your parents didn't ask you your opinion on things, or they didn't say, you know, you didn't say to them, Mom, you know, no, I don't agree with that. What, like, can you explain to me why you think like that? Your kids never challenged you never challenged your parents growing up. So now your kids challenging you, you see that as insubordination. So Ruth, how do you draw that line so you don't end up basically, I guess, killing or altering their behavior and basically making them grow up into someone that they weren't meant to be because you didn't like how they behaved?
Yeah.
End there.
Yeah, I'll quickly summarize what you've said, Vanessa, and then I will challenge Brandon slightly before I give. But Vanessa, what you're describing is, if you're okay for me to use my words, what I understand to be norms, drivers, and values. Okay, and so as human beings, we have norms and we have drivers which are absolute shouldn't, couldn't, you know, can't, you cannot do that, and then we have values. And what you're describing is, how do parents pass this on to their children or discern which is which while navigating their own unique DNA and personalities, and not kind of fudge both of them? So if you see a boisterous girl, you don't fudge it and say, oh gosh, they're not living by my values. But understand that there is a way that you can implement your value that will be shaped and expressed differently in that child. Is that a fair way to kind of summarize? Brilliant. And I
Yeah,
will chat
correct.
on that quickly. But Brandon, I mean, you said as a Nigerian, you're feeling very uncomfortable already with the thought that this child at 5 was seeking therapy. I mean, what's going on for you? Are you aware of what you're thinking when you had that?
No, I think maybe it's just unconsciously I've taken on the whole thing we said at the beginning about how African parents react to therapy. I think maybe my mind was like, oh yeah, as a teenager or young adult, you know, yeah, go to therapy. But I'm just thinking, I don't know, it just seems very young. That was just the first thing that came to my mind, like very young. And it's just like, oh, and also because I've never thought that would be the age that a child would go into. So because it's never crossed my mind, I've never like processed it. So my first thought was just like, should at 5, should they not? Can I even trust the person I'm giving them to be able to, you know, tell them the right things and the likes. So yeah, it's just, that's why at first it was just like, oh, my brain was just like, hold on. Yeah, that's
and I think
not
trust is a huge thing when bringing up children. It takes a village, and part of that village is, do you identify therapy to be a useful tool for every human being in society? Number one would be my question. And number two is figure out the therapist you trust. But it takes a village. And if a person has the skill set, the clear grace and gifting to be able to therapize that child in the season that they are in, I would say give them over to that child quickly. If you identify something that's
Mm.
perhaps not necessarily outside of your remit, but because of proximity, we as human beings sometimes don't lend ourselves a quick listening ear. And children are very, very quick to do this. Because it's mummy, because it's daddy, perhaps they won't lend themselves that listening ear. And because it's your child, perhaps you might lose patience a little bit quicker than you would when it isn't your child. Lots of things can come up to interrupt that
Mm.
flow. But you start thinking from the moment you're in the womb. So I think once thinking can be accessed, no child's too young to be seen by someone qualified to help them with anything. Like birth trauma is a big thing, and my fourth born had to undergo therapy, but I was able to do that with him because he was actually very, very open to that. But his birth was very traumatizing, and so he had to go through some level of therapy for that from a very young age, from the age of 2. And
Oh
so
wow.
there are lots of things that you can do with children that are outside of your control and doesn't make you a bad parent. But I'm so intrigued to find that
Mm.
that kind of driver has kind of sunk into your psyche and you've identified it quite quickly, Brandon.
Yeah,
Um,
because I think of recent I've been thinking about like kids more. Aside since since the day my friend said, "Oh, having a child is a selfish decision,"
mm,
and that was the first time I was like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! What do you mean?" It's a good thing to have because they're like, "No, it's your decision.
mhm,
So you made a decision for yourself,"
mhm,
and that's the first time I started like trying to process. Like, okay, so why do I want kids? I understand like, oh yeah, as a Christian, the Bible says, but like, why do I want kids, and what do I want for the kids?
mhm,
And I would always say my female daughter is going to be the first female Formula One champion. And then someone was like, I can't remember who asked it that. So if let's say she gets to F2, she's almost there, and she comes back and says, I don't want to do this anymore. What will you then do? And I was just like, oh, first of all, it's a very expensive sport. So I must have spent a lot of money,
yeah.
but I'm doing this thing where I prepare my mind for, or just kind of start accepting certain things myself to say, yeah, this I'll be fine with, or why would I not be fine with certain things? So
Mhm.
I guess it's something I have to plug into my head and be like, okay, yeah, if my child does need it, then yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, those are good questions to ask. And Vanessa, I mean, I did say I'll come back to what you had said. How do you navigate kind of allowing your child to be them? And have their own, and whilst you train them with the valuables that are not valuables, values that are bendable, almost expressible through their own unique identity. I think one of the things is what Brandon's doing already, being aware of your processing.
Mhm.
I think the more self aware we are, the more we are able to kind of discern and separate what is just me wanting this and what is this other person, this child of mine just wanting to be themselves. I think a lot of self
Mm.
awareness is huge in good parenting and actually opening yourself to be challenged quickly by yourself, like, oh, is this just me feeling this? Is a big one of my my boys love to dress up, and every time we used to go to church they would be the kids that would dress up like in the craziest outfits, and we were, everyone's looking at us like, look at this life coach, look at this, my husband doing what he's doing, and we wanted to look all together, but actually my boys made sure we did not. Being there in their costumes rolling on the floor during like worship, and they weren't worshiping, they were just rolling playing. And I was there just getting really hot and bothered and being aware that actually, I'm being hot and bothered because I'm aware of how people might be thinking about me.
Mm.
These
Mm.
boys are just having fun. And I don't want them to feel like church is a place where they have to be somebody who they're not. And this is oftentimes what we do to children. We're like, put your church clothes on or put your church face on. And immediately it starts to
Mm.
get inside our hearts and our head that God wants you to look a certain way before he accepts you. Okay. But if as a parent,
Wow.
I'm aware of, because you're significant authority, right? So I'm aware that, listen, these boys are just being them. It takes a lot of self-control and accountability with my husband. Like we have to be,
Mm.
and it's exposing. It's hard, it's vulnerable. But there are times that I would say to my husband, "This is what I'm thinking," and my husband would look me in the eyes and go, "That's just you. It's on you." And I
Mm.
don't like hearing it, but I have to. Yeah.
I have a question because I'm really loving this, guys. I'm really loving this conversation. Um, so I have a question. Do you
Mhm.
think, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this, do you think it's okay for parents to take, um, how do I say it? This is what it's on the tip of my tongue. Like, yes, do you think it's okay for parents to take credit for how their kids turn out? Why am I asking this? One, because I think it's unfair that yes, you've instilled values in us, but they almost take away our um thinking ability and our resolve when it comes to navigating peer pressure and our hard work and who we are as
Mm.
people,
Mm.
because they don't take the blame when the kids go off the rails.
Do they not though?
Well, because okay, so I don't think anyone in prison right now, their parents are going, "This is all my fault." They always say he derailed. So they don't take responsibility for, okay, reason this person is in prison is because I was too strict or because I was too lenient. They say I trained him the right way and he derailed.
Yeah.
So why is it then okay to take credit when your kid does well in school and behaves right, becomes a good member of society? Because I always feel like it takes away your child's ability to think for themselves, because the truth
Okay.
is your child has encountered a lot of people
Okay.
who didn't behave well and chose
Mhm.
not to go down that path. So you're almost taking credit and saying, I am who I am, maybe because of you, and if it wasn't for your training, but you don't actually know the decisions that I've had to make that maybe I didn't communicate with you. This is not even like a personal question. I'm just asking this,
Yeah.
generally. Yeah. What do you think
Yeah.
of that?
That's an
Mm.
interesting question because I actually have a client whose child went to prison and is still in prison, unfortunately. And part of their processing was the shame and the guilt in terms of what they did wrong. Um, but
Hmm.
interestingly, the person doesn't say that to people on the outside. The person does say that exact comment that you made, that I did everything I could. I don't know why they've made these decisions. And I can't generalize, but I can say that accepting situations or responsibility is something we often as human beings need to be trained to do because we have a blame focused
Mm.
mindset, which is unhealthy, which brings shame and guilt. Whereas shared responsibility, so like Adam, what are you doing, Adam? Where are you? It's the woman you gave me,
Hmm.
immediately it's like, starts blaming. That blame shift was never supposed to be. Where as human beings, we function, your mind functions and thrives in a shared responsibility and in a culture of honor where we get to do things and we don't kind of predispose blame on ourselves. Okay. And so that's a slight mindset shift, I think, that's really important. But this idea of them taking the glory, I think naturally when you see someone doing well, you've been a part of it, there's that human predispositions. You want to tell the world that I had a part to play in it.
Yeah.
That's my child. You see people, with their children on shows or programs, and my daughter got a scholarship. I was very quick to tell people that's my daughter out there. Did it take any honor away from her? I don't think so, because I think I did it in such a way that I was just so proud of her decisions that she had made. I
Mm.
was so proud that she has made the decisions that proved to me that she's capable, and not necessarily proud that I did that. I was proud that I'm part of that story that she's built, and I'm part of her narrative.
I think that's where I thought we would get to, because there is a difference, I think, in the delivery. Like, say maybe if you said things like, "Oh, thanks to me, this is I did it," as opposed to, "Oh, I'm so
Yeah,
glad that you listen. I'm so glad you've done this, and I'm so proud of you. Because the truth is, I don't think any child who has excelled in life, obviously with an active parent, has gone, well, I did that all by myself. I
Yeah.
think I mean, I personally always tell my mom, and I've mentioned in previous episodes that one of the people that I saw in life doing and achieving great things was my mom. And because of that, she doesn't even realize. And I always like try to tell her that, me seeing your work ethic is something that drove me as a child.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also a hard worker.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm also, I work hard, and I can be quite, diligent,
Mm-hmm.
or I try to be. And so my thing is always just, I'm grateful for your tutelage and for your example,
Mm-hmm.
but let's not trivialize the fact that I had a similar upbringing to many of my friends who didn't turn out like I did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So there was obviously a point where I had to choose to not do certain things. I mean, my mom's like, I don't, for example, drink alcohol. And
Mm-hmm.
she asked me, oh, why? Because, it's not something that she's basically ever said don't do.
Yeah.
She always just talks about the dangers of it. So she
Mm-hmm.
was very surprised that I don't. Um, And it's one of those things where I made a decision, because once again, I
Yeah.
didn't come from a home where alcohol wasn't being consumed. So I took that decision. So
Yeah.
I think maybe parents, as you've said, in my opinion, rightly, is your phrasing and your demeanor and your behavior around, the achievements of your children should translate to, yes, I'm glad I got, I played a part in this, and, I'm glad that you listened. I'm glad that I was able to, raise you right, essentially. But I thank you also for being a child who listened,
Yeah.
and a child who
Hmm.
did what you were supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean? Because that way they also feel as though you appreciate their decision
The
in not,
efforts, yeah.
in exactly the efforts in not straying when they clearly had the opportunity to stray. I know a lot of Nigerian kids would be like, when your mom's like, you haven't washed your plates today. Look at how dirty the house is. And you remind them, Mom, my age mates are getting pregnant. My age mates are doing drugs. My age mates are in prison. Almost like, trust me, I did not have to turn out the way I did.
Yeah.
I had choices, and I chose not to disgrace you. Please give me my wins.
Uh,
But yeah, that's what I think. That's what I think about it.
Mm-hmm.
all right. Okay, so outside of general questions, there was something I really wanted you to touch on.
Mm-hmm.
That I think would be very useful is things that we spoke about in my session. So I really wanted you to touch on heart values, head values. So what they are,
Mm-hmm.
and congruence about
Mm-hmm.
like getting to a space where you have that, because I think that's the first time you mentioned that to me, I was very like, I didn't realize, because I understood, well, I never clearly understood why I made certain decisions,
Mm-hmm.
or I couldn't go through with certain decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you broke that down, I thought, okay, this is something that I think clearly everyone has it, a heart value
Mm-hmm.
and a head value. So I
Yeah.
just wanted you to explain what that is, and how people can maybe practice understanding what they are for each person,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's just speaking on congruence
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, kind of putting it together. So
Yeah. So congruence is a big, big darling of mine, because I personally, as a growing up as a black girl in the diaspora in a white majority school, who it was an independent school, boarding school, where there was just all boys, and we were the first set of girls. I found I was quickly challenged by this idea of lack of authenticity and my own values that I'd learned from Nigeria during the 8 years that I'd grown up there, and then being in this country and being bombarded with everything else. And then I was living a life that I thought in my head I'd made certain decisions about, but actually they weren't matching. And I realized that there's lots of research evidence that proves this as well. But the quick summary of it is that our minds usually have values, and we have things that we have as for example, I won't smoke, I don't drink, I don't want to have sex before I get married. Okay, let's take big things. Or I think racism is wrong. Okay, then you have your life experiences that do challenge your values, and you find yourself then under certain situations doing exactly what you thought you believed you wouldn't do, or is just completely contradictory to your own personal values. And so you find your heart living in a different way. Okay. And so I call this the heart, the head heart value. And there's just no matching kind of, there's no synergy. Where we want to be is where our heart and our minds are matching. And so we have to stop and ask ourselves a question: what am I doing? I say, okay, I won't date a white guy, but I find that I'm always going for white guys. So I've got mismatch right there. What's going on right there? And so I
Mm.
have to sit down and ask myself, what's really going on? And actually, I discover in my heart, I really, really want to marry a white guy. But actually, in my mind, I think I must not because my family won't accept me. Okay. So I've got mismatch and I need to now explore to bring myself into a greater level of congruence, authenticity, where I'm living by my heart and accepting myself in my mind. And that gives me that level of congruence and authenticity and internal unity where I'm no longer fighting with myself or doing things that I'm like dealing with my behavior, dealing externally with behaviors that actually I need to first start with my head and my heart, those values, and get them to be congruent. I always start with numbers. You'd hear me speak often about 3s and 5s because we get lost, I think, once we get more than 5 things. But then usually with my clients, I sit down with them and we explore real life situations. And from there, I'm able to kind of get us by asking questions, we dig deep and discover perhaps 3 key values in their head, but actually 3 other values in their heart. And we discover why there's no congruence. And then they get to, for their own selves, choose what they want to live by. And it might well just be an experience, this kind of damaging or thought pattern. Like I said, for example, I'm really scared my parents will not accept me if I bring a white guy into the home. Wow, let's discuss that then. And they realize that actually they want to go by their heart and they're going to go and do what they feel, either they fall in love with, or what they feel is best for them, or how they feel God's leading.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah. This is gonna be a funny one ish,
Hmm.
but I've always wondered how, just to segue, because it just popped in my head and I remembered I was going to
Hmm.
ask you this. Friendships and relationships with people.
Hmm.
And this is something that we actually touched on, Ruth, and you have no clue how much it changed my life.
Okay. You'd have to
I'm all
remind
right to
me.
explain how we arrived at this thing where we did the circles.
Yes, yes.
So
Boundaries.
I am a person who, well, um, my natural disposition in life is I am a giver. It's my default, and it can
Hmm.
be very annoying. But that's my default.
Hmm.
So I found for a very long time that I had a problem with people because there was no reciprocity
Hmm.
to my behavior towards them.
Hmm.
And I would find myself because of that, just being always angry
Hmm.
that people are so unkind,
Hmm.
people are so, not very nice.
Hmm.
And then I had this exercise with Ruth where we drew circles. And in the first circle was me and God.
Hmm.
Second circle was like me and 2 core people in my life. And
Hmm.
the people I was mad at
Hmm.
were in my 6th circle. And I think you mentioned something like, why do you put the responsibilities of a 2
Hmm.
on a 6
Hmm. Hmm.
and expect them to come through for you?
Hmm.
And I found that it's recently started propping up. And the reason I brought this up is actually for people out there on my Twitter TL or my X
Hmm.
TL and
Hmm.
on TikTok who will come and do story times about how they didn't get invited to someone's birthday,
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
someone's wedding,
Hmm.
to someone's barbecue.
Hmm.
And maybe talk to them and how to first of all be open and honest about the relationships in their life and the
Yep.
expectations that they have and how they've communicated those expectations to people in their life. Because if you're not getting sorry, can I just draw an example? I have a friend
Mm-hmm.
who got married very recently.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, if you hear this, it's not you, because we talked about this prior to your wedding. Um, this person had a wedding. It wasn't a small wedding, but I wasn't invited to the wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a bit annoyed,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm being honest with you. I was like, I thought we were, I kid you not, you just popped so big in my head. And by myself, I did not have this conversation with anybody. I was
Mm-hmm.
stewing. And I had that conversation with myself.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, but are you really that close? Because I've also RSVP'd no to certain weddings because I didn't really think I was close enough to that person to spend £500 across
Yeah, yeah.
clothes, transport, hotels for somebody I don't even have a relationship with you in any form. And I thought,
Mm-hmm.
be honest with yourself. If you had a guest list of 100 people, would this person even be on your wedding
Mm-hmm.
list?
Mm-hmm.
You don't, this person wasn't invited to your birthday. This
Mm-hmm.
person maybe gets a generic happy birthday from you. You don't post them on your story. You've never had a heart to heart. You didn't even get invited to the bridal shower. And you're not really that close.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why do you think why do you think you, you know, you're basically owed a wedding invitation?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
By myself, I had that conversation. And I'm like, you know what? It's true. We're not like
Mm.
besties. We're not buddy buds. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
you go to big weddings where you even get a plus one and everything, but this wedding seemed intimate, like maybe 100, 120 people. I'm sure they had people, you met them in uni. I'm sure they had people before uni. You haven't seen them in years. Post uni, they have friends. They've made more concrete relationships and you just
Yeah.
don't fit in. So I want you to speak to people who hold it. I'm going to use a Nigerian phrase here. Tie the world to their chest and are so always so annoyed about, oh, I thought we were cool, you didn't
Yeah,
invite me,
yeah.
I thought we were cool. Like how they navigate the different stages in their relationships and go, you know what, you're a 5, it's okay if I don't come to your wedding.
Yeah, yeah.
You're a 3, I can be upset with you when you don't call me. I
Yeah.
can be
Yeah.
upset with you when you takes you days to respond to my message because you're a 3, you're my person. So I can be mad at you for that, but not a 6. So
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, Vanessa. So what you're describing, I've tried to draw it quickly while you were talking. I don't know if your people see it, but it's
Yeah, that's
yeah. So it's a boundary.
that's it.
So it's a boundary circle where you draw yourself in there. So you can put a stick man or whatever you like, and this will be you and God. Okay. And then I recommend we usually go up to 5. Some people need 6 or 7, but I start with 5. Okay. And then in your first circle, you write the people that are really close to your heart. Usually, for many people, it's their parents, their partners, children. And effectively, what you do as you go wider and wider outside of that circle is that you start to place boundaries and expectations. And these are modalities that are really powerful. Number one, to guard your heart. And number two, to help you in terms of how you communicate expectation to yourself and expectation to other people. So if I say, like Vanessa, you've used that terminology, this person's a 5, this person's a 3. If you're a 1, you are probably my husband, okay? And I have different expectations from you. And so I will allow you to influence me because you're that close to my heart. And I will communicate my expectations to you. If you're a 2, you could be a very close friend, but perhaps not as close to me as number 1. If you're a 5, you could be an acquaintance that I've really loved and I may speak with you once a year or twice a year.
Mm.
However, I will not have the expectations of you that I would have of a person within my number 2 circle, because it would be unhealthy. And these are ways in which we spend ourselves and burn ourselves out, okay? Because we have such incongruent expectations of people. Such unhealthy expectations of people, but also expectations of ourselves, of what you give to these people, because actually you're not within my near heart circle. And I always recommend that people do this very frequently because people can shift and change. And it's always helpful to ask yourself, why is that person shifting and changing? A useful tool on top of this is not just putting the person there, but it's also being able to determine whether or not you can communicate to that person where they are in that circle. So, for example, if I place you,
Mm.
Vanessa, in number 2, I need to be able to communicate that to you so that my expectations with you are clear. If I cannot, then maybe I shouldn't have you as a 2. Okay. So those are helpful determining factors. This is not just your world. Because if I have expectations of you that I can't communicate with you, healthy relationships always should be able to put forward on the table, these are the needs I have of this relationship. Now, of the five, I don't think it will be healthy for you to place certain types of expectations, or even have that conversation. That would be unhealthy. And it would expose you to perhaps things that could be unhelpful for you depending on where you are in your season of life.
Wow. Ruth.
This has been. Thank you so much
Such a pleasure.
for this, and just for accepting our invitation as well. Yeah, I think I'll put your details out if anyone wants to reach out, wants to speak to you, or anything like that.
Yes.
We'll put your details out.
Brilliant.
Well,
And
yeah, thank
for your
you.
listeners, I'm offering a discount if they quote Van and B of a £50 session and a free
Oh,
consultation.
Oh, is it? Okay,
Get in
is
touch
it?
with Van and B. I'm not yet very technological. I've been having lots of babies, but yes, no, I'm going to stick that up on my Instagram post as well.
No problem.
I mean, Ruth,
Thank you so much
you
for
are
that.
such a
Yeah.
blessing. And I just want to say, like, and I thank God for the people in my life that obviously He put in my life who led me to you. But it's just like I mean, I've benefited greatly from our sessions and from your wisdom in general. And I thank you for coming on here. I really hope that a lot of people who have listened to this, I hope that even though you didn't ask questions, that your questions have been answered. And I think as human beings, we just want to be better. We want to do better. And I think one thing I'm very, very grateful for our generation and the generation behind us is that we want to fix things. We want to do things right. We've identified, we're not just blaming the older generation and saying they did this to us and they did this damage. We said, you know what? They've done what they've done and we can't undo it. But how do we make sure that one, we're able to sort the things out that we don't like within ourselves, and two, not pass that on to the next generation so they're also having the exact same conversation in 30 years, right? So hopefully you guys have learned a lot from this episode. I'm very, very happy about it. I was making notes myself. Obviously I'm still going to go listen to this, but I was literally making notes and be like, whoo, that was a word. That was a word. But thank you, Ruth. Thank you very much for
Huge pleasure.
coming on
Thank you
here.
guys
We
for having me
appreciate
on.
you.
Thank you so much. All right,
Okay.
thank you everyone for listening, and yeah, see you on the next one.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.